Sorry about that. Can you hear a little bit better now? My volume level might have gotten a little kinky while I was straightening out the cable. It seems like it's going now. Of course, it thought that before, so perhaps things are still at issue here. Let's see. Whoa. Yeah. Okay. That seems like it might be working now. I just blew my ear out. Um, anyway, let's go ahead and revamp the stuff that apparently might not have gone through. I'm not sure where it might have cut out there. The idea that we're working on first here is somebody asked in this comment section of the most recent video, is it possible to create an override that would make all build systems run in Terminus? Because normally what you'd have to do is construct a build system manually that has a custom target to be able to do something like that. Oh, good sound. We have independent confirmation that the sound is good. Awesome. So we're going to play with that. And to do that, I have a sandbox copy of Sublime 3210 set aside that's completely distinct from everything else to play in because I don't want to mess up my Sublime 3 or Sublime 4 installations for playing with something like this. And also, when you're investigating how to do something, best to keep things, zoom that up a little bit, as stock as possible to make sure that something else might not get in the way. And I have a script that sets up one of these things, and I keep the settings in it as simplistic as possible so that if I need to spin up a sandbox to investigate a problem for someone, that things are as stock as it can possibly be to make things easier to reproduce or not reproduce, and making sure that there's a setting. A lot of the time I use this for things so when people ask if a certain behavior does something or not, and I'm constructing an answer to say, is there a setting that does this? I like to make sure that I don't accidentally have that setting turned on. So just as a test, and let's see, do I have a sample in here? No, I don't. So let's say we create a Python file like so. Oh, crap. Right, that's not going to work. Never mind. That starts up the other version. So let's go ahead and we'll just do it this way. My home directory test.py, like so. Yeah, replace it. It's empty. And if we were to print hello world, like so, then if I do this and choose the appropriate build, we get it running down there in the standard panel, like so, which is exactly how you would expect a build system to work. Now, if we wanted to create a build system that used Terminus, we would do something like, well, we wouldn't normally do this with create override, but it's going to be simpler to do it this way. We could pick Python and the build file like so, and add in here a target key of Terminus exec and a cancel key of Terminus, cancel build like so. And then if we were to do it and hit the build, oh, did I not save that? Packages, Python.Sublime build. Okay, well, that really seems like it should be doing something. Oh, wait, never mind. I forgot. Terminus, select color scheme. I am in a different, what do I normally use? Solarized Darkula. That's not what I normally use. I use this one normally, I think. This is definitely a Terminus panel and not a regular one, but the color scheme was throwing me off. Terminus build results. Right on. Maybe we need to pick a different one to make that more obvious. How about this one? Let's quit and restart because it may be acting a little bit funky. I probably should have left that open for the purposes of that. There we go. Okay. I think the configuration change doesn't apply to panels unless you destroy and recreate them. And the easiest way to do that is to restart because I don't have the key binding in place that does something like that. So now our build system is actually running inside of here. And if we were to comment, that line and that line out, then, and come back to here. It goes back to a standard build, which we can see we can type in here where we couldn't before. Perfect. And we need to delete this particular file and that whole thing. So let's go into data packages and that. So this file no longer exists. We're good to go. And also, I'm going to install one more package here, which should be this one, because otherwise I'm going to go slightly crazy. Okay, so we are good to go on that. So the idea here is, let's say we wanted all of our build systems to go through Terminus and without having to do that thing where you create one. How could we do something like that? So what we would probably do is say OverrideAudit create override on the default package in the exec.py plugin, and we'll go ahead and we'll do that for the time being. This is the plugin that ships with the default package in Sublime that contains the exec command, and it's responsible for executing all build systems unless you do that thing we just did where we change the target. Sublime assumes that the target is the exec command unless you specifically tell it otherwise. And this async process is what's responsible for running the program in the background. And this is where we can totally see that if we were to start something up, standard in is set to a pipe, and so is in and out, but we start up something that listens for output going to standard out and something going to standard error, but we don't set up anything that gives input to standard in. And that's why if you use a regular build system to execute something that's interactive, like a Python program that uses input, it will essentially hang in the background because it's waiting forever for you to provide input. But what you type into the panel down here, this one here, doesn't get sent to the program that's currently running. This is just basically a buffer that's pointed at nothing at all, which is the reason why we want to use Terminus in the first place. The actual command itself is the exec command. We can see here the arguments that it takes. And if you were to use, and maybe I should go ahead and install this because we might want it as well. Don't have that listed in here, huh? Shoot. That's a bit of an oversight. Hang on. We're going to take a little bit of a side trip here because I totally forgot that my boilerplate thing does not support or doesn't have the appropriate repository set for this. And whoops, that's not the right one, but it's close enough. We want Sublime packages from the stealthy and hasty repository and the unreleased packages raw file, like so. Copy that, come over here, paste it in there, and then we can install a package and install Snappy. Come on. Is it already installed? No. Why would that not work, my friend? Oh, did it? Oh, crap. Rate limit exceeded. It's not going to be able to download any new files. Well, banana fudge ripple, they say. Well, we're going to have to wait a little bit before we can get in on that business then, I guess. But essentially, if you look in the official documentation for build systems, there's a lot of the options that you see in here by unstrange coincidence are exactly the arguments you can put in a build system, because all the Sublime build file does is go ahead and override that, is call the command that you give it with the target, which defaults to exec with all of the arguments that it gets. So what we might want to do if we wanted to replace this is implement our own copy of the exec command that just calls Terminus. But there's a little something we need to worry about here. This exec event listener wants to execute the exec command to update phantoms. And the reason for doing that is that the exec command itself, up here, as part of it, oh, thank you, as part of its operation, of course, captures error messages. And if you have the appropriate settings set, it inlines the error messages, or in Sublime 4, they're annotated on the right-hand side of the line instead of being inlined underneath as little balloons. And that information is stored, those results are stored in the window. So there's a little event listener, which and an argument here in this command, we can see here, update phantoms only, where if you call it and the setting for showing errors in line is set, then it will update phantoms and do nothing else. That makes sure, so if you were to compile your code and there was an issue and one of the error messages that falls out is a file that you don't currently have open, when you double click on it in order to open it, the event listener fires because a file is being loaded, and it tells the exec command to update phantom. So if there are any errors in that file, it will include those little bubbles in there if the setting is set. You can always create a GitHub app to get the credentials for that rate limiting thing. Yeah, thanks, Ashwin. Actually, I have that set up and it does not work. I spent a bunch of time fiddling around with it the other day. Basically, I traced into the package control code, and at no point do those query parameters ever get sent unless I force them in. And I can't remember what the exact specification for that was. I think the reason I had a version of the sandbox set up before this started was because I was testing that. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is for that, because I'm pretty sure it worked before, and I'm pretty sure it must have worked for Gwenzek, if that was the person I think who chased down with Will how to do that. It probably works for you as well, but it does not work here. As a matter of fact, I would imagine if I did the appropriate thing here, we'd actually see it. I'm not going to do that on the stream because, private key and all of that business. But yeah, I specifically set it up in my, in fact, I discovered that it didn't work when I was updating the settings in my sandbox script so that it would just always be applied. Which reminds me that I should go back and do that again because the font is set wrong. What we're going to do here for our purposes is change this to be original exec command like this. And down at the bottom, we're going to change this to run original exec as well. That plugin reloaded. So now there's no longer an exec command, right? So if I was to quit, I'm going to go ahead and quit that now too. And, well, we don't need to do that per se. But if we were to fire the sandbox up, all builds should now be failing, I would imagine. Unable to find target command exec. So the exec command no longer exists as far as this is concerned. But if we could probably do something like run command original exec. Boy, it's disconcerting when the console input widget doesn't have the appropriate syntax, isn't it? And the arguments we provided to were shell command echo hi. Then the command's still there. We just can't execute it as part of a build system. So the next thing to worry about in that case is replacing this. So we could just do something like this. I guess we'll do it here first. Class exec command. And no, it could be anywhere, but we'll do it here. And it's going to be a Sublime plugin. I realize I've really gotten used to the way the autocomplete works in Sublime 4 because now I've sort of retrained my fingers to do stuff the other way, and now it doesn't quite work. Window command, like so. Normally, when we did something like this, we would subclass the exec command, but we don't need to do that here. But we do want a run method that takes any number of keyword arguments. And then we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to say if kill in, I think it's kill. Yes, it is. If kill in keyword args, then we want a keyword args.pop kill. It's probably a nicer way to do that. And then return self.run command. Terminus cancel build with kwargs. I believe that's the way to pull that off. Otherwise, we can self.run command, the terminus. Oh, I did a lot of web programming today. Terminus exec is the command we want, and the keyword arguments. So theoretically, if I did something correctly, whoops, my bad. Let's try that again. Oh, right. Oh, slightly more complicated. There are a couple of keys that oh, did I no. I probably want to do that. I can never remember. I do it so infrequently. Which one of those we want? There we go. It's as embarrassing as having to always go to the wiki to remember how to open a file because I do it so infrequently. So now our Python file is running in exec even though it's using or in Terminus exec even though it's using a standard build. So that's about as hard as it takes to do that. What we actually need to run is something that's more long-lived. So I guess for that we need a new build system, and we might say sleep 60 and echo done and save it as, yeah, sure, untitled. Untitled will do. Change the tools build system. Up there, yeah. To untitled. So if we were to try to build, we can cancel the build from there. And if we were to try to build, we could go up here and cancel the build from here. And well, I guess an unfortunate side effect of this is that the cancel build item will always be running because our command doesn't have and is enabled that knows if Terminus exec is currently running. Is it worth actually doing something like that? I'm not aware per se of any easy way to tell if Terminus exec is running any more than knowing if a process is actually running. So that might just be something you sort of have to live with, I would guess. It doesn't hurt anything to do that. Nothing happens as a result. I mean, it should be calling the thing anyway. If we did something like this. Killing with extreme prejudice. Yep. Move the keyboard over. Now, I suppose if we pick this, it should be saying that. So it is invoking Terminus cancel build, but I assume Terminus cancel build is smart enough to not care. I wonder, I'm just assuming that it gets mad if you do that. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't. Still happy without that, huh? That's interesting. Maybe that's how it's working behind the scenes too. We should look at the code for Terminus. Terminus core. Okay. I have looked at the code for Terminus a time or 10. Terminus cancel build command. It would just be the cancel key. So the real question then becomes, what does Terminus exec do? It just actually kills the thing, huh? Oh, that's because it doesn't actually care about any of its arguments. Sweet. There are a couple of arguments in Terminus that it supports that it doesn't support that standard exec does. So one other thing that you would have to do to get this working would be to do something with those. And those are path and shell, I believe. If our build system said something like, whoops, path, $path, like this, then the build system fails because it doesn't support that key, even though build systems do. And the other one was shell true, I think. Whoops. It gets mad about that one too. You'd use shell true if you're using command. Terminus thinks you should either use command or you should use shell command. So there's a manual process you would use to set shell to true. If you're using shell true, then you remove that line and convert your command into shell command in order to do stuff. I covered that in the video on running anything with Terminus. So I would say for the purposes of anybody that cares about something like this, you just have to sort of lump it that there might be some build systems that you have to modify. All the ones that ship with Sublime would work by default. We could run an interactive C program, for example. So that's probably cool, I would think. So the whole entirety of the change in that case is to change that to original exec and change that to original exec. And the idea behind that is just that you don't want to clobber the exec command away entirely because something somewhere might want it. I mean, obviously it wouldn't work because it's trying to run your command, but if you wanted to run exec, you could do it. And also, it's easier than giving an instruction that says delete absolutely everything out of the file. So as far as these things go, that's actually pretty simple. I don't foresee any horrible issues a person might have as a result of doing something like that. So that's probably okay. Yeah, probably. Interestingly, did you know that you should be able to double click on the separator line and have that happen? But I just did it a bunch of times and it didn't. That's one of those things that some people don't know about Sublime, like this menu item down here. So we were just discussing in the Discord various things that people have been using Sublime HQ software for a while and not noticed that there was something funky going on. Okay, so let's go ahead and close that because we don't care. One of the things that I wanted to do something with is the, oh, right. Gotta open the one from the packages directory and not the one from that directory. There we go. Now it's untracking the symlinks copy or untracking the regular copy and tracking the symlink copy. This causes the package to blow up due to the way that automatic package reloader reloads things. Because the top level plugin, when this reloads, that's when plugin loaded gets called, and then it tries to tell something in the lib folder here that the plugin thing was loaded so that it can continue to, it can set things up, and then it comes along and reloads that file, and when it does, it gets mad because it doesn't have the information that it needs. And in specific, we can see the line right there in packages.py line 180, which is probably up here, and something we have looked at in the past at line 180, this one here. And this is failing because package info.shipped packages path, this bit here, is none. And it's none because up here in the, oops, did I go too far? Oh, sorry, yeah, the actual class itself, which is actually further down. Oops. Package info class. Thus, it has this class level thing here. When the class initializes, that's when it sets this up. But this is not something that you can actually get while the plugin is the executable path and a bunch of, or most of the rest of the API is only available to you after the plugin host has fully loaded everything because it's an asynchronous process. This is actually excuse me, the topic of the Plugin 101 video that's coming out on Monday. And there's only a couple of things that you can actually access, things that are static, like the version number of Sublime, the build number, what architecture it's running on, and stuff like that. But the executable path, the packages path, and all of that other information isn't available till after the plugin host loads. So the main plugin file over in, whoops, this panel, which is where I normally keep it, We can see when the plugin loads, it calls core.loaded to actually do setup to let things know. And if we looked in core.py in loaded, one of the things it does is set up the settings. And the other thing it does is call packageinfo.init to actually invoke the code that we saw over here to set this stuff up, because this is not available otherwise. However, this works in core Sublime, obviously, but it doesn't work if you use automatic package reloader, because automatic package reloader reloads this file first, which calls this method, which sets this up. Then it reloads this file, which throws this class away and makes a fresh one. And now this is set to none again. And then that thing blows up like we saw there. So basically, automatic package reloader is causing this to not work. And probably, if it reloaded files from the inside out instead of the outside in, that wouldn't be a problem. But I assume that Randy is doing it this way for very specific reasons. So one thing we might actually want to fix here, not that it has any outward facing contact to anybody else, but just because it's annoying as balls, is setting this up in a lazy fashion so that the first time it's accessed, that's when it gets created, instead of doing it this way. Where exactly is this used? It's used in the scan. It's used in the scan, and it's used to know about where packages exist, right? So, oh crap. Oh. I am getting ridiculously close to the idea of removing that from my mouse map, because I'm tired of accidentally doing that. I did it twice earlier today while I was fiddling with some stuff. So let's see. The code we actually want is no. Package info in this thing here. Let's go ahead and grab this code out of here for the time being. This is giving us the shipped packages path. And this is incidentally one of those things where the API has a method for packages path, which gives you the packages directory, and installed packages path, which gives you the place where Sublime package files are stored. But what you don't have access to is the place where the packages that ship with Sublime are stored, which are in a packages folder inside of the same location as the actual executable itself. And owing to the fact that OverrideAudit needs to be able to look at those files to be able to do any of its work, we need to actually know that information. This is actually sort of an optimization, if you will, on being able to get this information without having to constantly do these calculations all the time, which may or may not actually cause any problem, but it gets called a lot while packages are being scanned, and there can be a lot of packages. So I want to make sure that that works out nicely. So we're going to do this, and let's go ahead and write a thing here. Whoops, one more there. No. What would we say this does? Get the location for shipped packages in Sublime. This, lazy loads the path on first call and requires that the plugin host be set up completely before being called. And we're going to do something a little bit different here. Let's turn that off for the time being. Jump over to there. We want something similar to this in this particular code. The executable path is the directory name of the executable, and then here we're going to say, well, we'll actually grab this out like this. The shipped packages path is equal to that, and then return underscore shipped packages path dot, well, we'll call it path. We don't need to be, well, we'll call it package path. What the heck? like so. And then we can say if not has adder. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, that thing. If shipped packages path and the attribute that it has is package path, then this. And let's go ahead and do this and say that fetching, oh, I'll do this. Fetching shipped packages path, else path was cached. That way we can make sure that it's actually doing probably what we expect it to do. So if the shipped packages path function doesn't have the attribute package path, execute this code, which actually sets it to something. Otherwise, just say it didn't and then return the cached value. So if we were to copy that, save it, that's not going to actually reload anything. As a matter of fact, the whole plugin, I think, won't reload now. Well, it might, I guess it does because it's not the reload that's breaking, so that's good. Whoops. Well, why do I have two of those? That's an unfortunate thing. Copy that. Now we need to go ahead and find you. We no longer, well, yeah, we no longer want this. But we do want to search for shipped packages path, that one. So anywhere we see this, we would call this method. And here we would call this method. That's actually the method. That's the attribute in the method. That's us setting it up. That's doing it. Here's one. Call the thing. And we don't need that or that or that. So there we go. So now this is scanning the shipped packages path for that particular package file. This is finding all packages inside that shipped packages path. That's the actual method. That's the only place any of this stuff happens, right? Perfect. And then it cycles back around. So if we came back over to this file, we don't need to call packageinfo.init here any longer because it's not going to work anyway. We'll save that one. We'll quit. We'll restart. And with luck, we see a bunch of stuff here. The first time it was called, it was fetched, and the rest of the times it was cached. And that was it doing stuff, capturing the list of packages to know if it needs to generate a report or not. So we should be able to create a package report and see the information in here. We see it say the path was cached. So that's looking nice. Cool. And if we wanted to create an override report, that's over in this window. It's just going to reload the existing one. We can see the reason why there were so many lines where it was calling it is because of how many packages there are and various resources in here partially. We're going to close that. We don't care about that right now. So that is 100% working. And if we hit this, well, actually, let's clear the console first. If we reload, everything reloaded properly. Although I really would have expected package resource viewer to, or automatic package reloader to have more to say about it. Oh, I guess I need to actually do it in here, don't I? Boop. So it successfully reloaded everything. Awesome. So I'm going to come over here and let's see. That's a good change. That's a good change. That's a good change. This part could be a little bit nicer. That doesn't need to be there. Those don't need to be there. Reload the package. Hey, automatic package reloader is making our lives easier again. That's going to make life nicer down the line. So let's go ahead and pop into this thing. And what am I in here? OverrideAudit. Oh, I'm actually in the right place too. That's cool. I'm on refreshing right now, am I? Let's create a new branch from here. What did I actually put in here? Parts of commands. Yeah, we're going to have to get back to that in another stream. So let's go ahead and create a branch from here. What would we call this? Pre-V 2.2.1. 2.2.2. Hey, that's a nice number. This could be one of those small releases. Really? I guess that makes sense. No branch, thank you. V 2.2.2. Nice. So now we can go ahead and pop that. Let's be this one here. Boop, boop, boop. And what do we have for changes here? This is, again, one of those situations where we're going to check in that change. We don't call packageinfo.init anymore, and we remove packageinfo.init and its shipped packages path. So let's go ahead and stage that hunk. Everywhere we would have called referred to packageinfo.shippedpackages path, we now do this. We should probably make sure we don't call that anywhere outside of this too. So we'll do that in just a second. But that's a place where we're doing it, and that's a place where we're doing it, and that's a place where we're doing it. And this is us actually adding that in. So that's all the stuff we need for that. So let's say fix APR issues. And this is totally one of those things where I should add a change log entry, but this isn't really something that's going to affect anybody but me. So I don't know that that's necessarily anything we care about here. Go ahead and commit that. Let us do a little bit of this. There's hits in packages.py, and that's it. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. I'm pretty sure that I implemented that in a way. Man, I got a lot of files in this thing. I guess the last thing we did in here might have been an actual release. We don't care about that or that. Well, or that, or the change log. Good grief. This isn't actually even part of this package. That's part of HyperHelp now. We don't care. We want the top level one. That's something that needs to go into the scraps repository. I got a lot of those going on. The script that does all of this business, and because I was looking at that the other day. Cool. Now over here, we don't care about my Linux key bindings. We do want that. Probably don't care about that or that or that. And unified diff, I'm just keeping that around, basically forever until I finish the bit of code that's responsible for actually doing patches and such. That's one thing I wanted to do here. Now the other thing, and hopefully this would actually be fairly easy to do as well. Oops. When we do something like a package report, oops, I should hit that key and do it like, well, say an override report. The cursor ends up at the bottom, or when I keep missing that key. If we created a package report, the cursor, we can't see it, but it's at the bottom. And that's because this is using append to cram data into this thing. Would be nice if the cursor was shuffled back up to the top of the file as a result of these, because I think it's common if you were to choose a file to open, the cursor ends up on line 1. It doesn't end up on the bottom. This is one of the things that irritates the hell out of me with Package Resource Viewer when I was using it, because when you use it to open a resource, it does the same thing. It grabs the thing out of the package and appends it in. And in that case, the cursor's at the bottom, and then you try to start typing and the view jumps, which is why my version of the command doesn't do that. So I'd like reports to do the same thing. I think that would be a nicer thing to do. The problem with that is I don't entirely remember how that works. Incidentally, Ashwin, I was kind of flattered that you mentioned in the Discord the other day that you like the way that I arranged the contents of the package here. this wasn't how the original version of it was actually created. Everything was all sort of in the root of the package because that's the what it looked like when I was looking at other people's packages. And then I got real sad when it came time to start implementing new features. And things were really hard to get a hold of with everything being all inside one giant plugin file and such. So that's, when I embarked upon the BSR, the big scary refactor to clean everything up for version 2. Uh, now, mm, where does reporting happen? I guess report thread. Oh, no, report generation thread. Pardon me. Report gen thread. This is the place, whoops, where all of the reports go through. So basically, we just need to add a line here. The problem with this is we're not really allowed to fiddle with the selection to move it without having a view command. So we could create like a text command to be able to modify this to jump to the top, but it's probably easier to just say view.run command move to, and then the args would be something. BOF, I would imagine. Yeah. 2. Whoops. And we'll throw, well, that should be enough, I would think. Let's turn the logging off before I go mildly insane. Reload the package. Cursor's at the top. Package report. Cursor's at the top. That's a nice change. A lot of these things are tricky for the purposes of trying to remember exactly where the code exists in the thing. Cool. So that is something that should actually be in the changelog. So when creating reports, make sure that the cursor ends up at the top of the buffer. I think my plan for this was to start preparing for releases a little bit earlier. So all of that stuff can happen all at the beginning instead of at the end, because that's a little bit of a drag. Oops. And then we come over to here and grab those 2 lines, paste them in here. That was the right thing, right? Yep. Cool. Okay, we got that. We got a change log. So if we came over here, then the changes are, there's a new entry in the change log. So stage that, and we have a new messages file for the next version whenever it appears. Properly commaed to make sure that the JSON syntax is cool. The actual 1-line change to make this work. And that is, untracked files. Add this one here, which is the same file as that one. And then say, make cursor jump to top on when reports open. And commit. Now I'll swing by here and fill these commit messages out to be something a little bit nicer. Now, what do I got there? That is nothing entirely interesting. Victor Vic may have been the person who asked the question about how to override the exec command to just use pure terminus. But that's not what we're worried about here. That is a private repository, so we'll just go ahead and steer away from that one before we copy this thing out. There. There was an issue released. Well, you got to give credit where it's due. I have a habit of checking code before installing the package, and hence I see how the code is organized. Oh, thank you for saying that. I'm a data hoarder. I like to keep things as neat as possible, but this is also one of those things that I've mentioned before that swings around to the idea that for the last 20 years I've been looking at code that I wrote and that other people wrote to do maintenance on it. And in such a case, one of the nice things is having code that's easy to read and understand. Let's see. Specialized override report that only shows files that are different from base, or a way to skip on modified files in a bulk diff report. And I'd code full to level 2. I have full package overrides for lots of shipped packages, but most of those are unmodified. There are dozens of snippets I've never looked at. They all show up. When I do an audit, what I really care about are the files I've added, deleted, or changed. The default behavior works well if you're using it to tweak single files. Right. Okay, so I imagine this is one of those things very similar to functionality that we added, I'm going to say a few streams ago relative to when the last time was that we worked on OverrideAudit, which has been a while now. I'm sure that's not screwing itself up again. Keith Hall requested the ability to revert and override because he also spends a lot of time working on the shipped packages, and he has those symlinked into the packages themselves, symlinked into his packages folder so that he can work on them and use them. And they're stored in Git, so they're safe. But sometimes when you're troubleshooting a problem for someone, you need to revert back to what everybody else would be using to make sure that the thing that you're about to look at is based on the same thing that person is using and not your modified version. So he wanted the ability to revert and override. And this is, one of those features that it's not the sort of thing that I would have thought of myself because I don't normally do something like that. Um, so yeah, so what we have here, okay, so a specialized report that only shows files that are different. So it would an override report only different. So if the file exists and is the same, yeah, and there was also a Fichtfall mentioned on here, possibly a duplicate of 34. But the thing that Fichtfall was asking for was something a little bit different, but still similar to that. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this. I looked at this the other day when I was walking, but I never actually commented on it when it was made. Yeah, well, 5 days ago. Good gravy. I was sort of planning on doing something for the stream, but I thought it was only a couple of days ago that happened. Must be thinking of a different issue. So what we want is what similar to the other thread that we have, or the other branch that we have here, is this refreshing thread, which is something that would freshen all expired overrides all in one shot, which I believe is the thing that Fichtfall was mentioning with his possible duplicate here. You don't need the report that shows that. So yeah, so I don't really like the idea of having the native thing not show you files that are different or not different, I should say, because I'm imagining the bulk of people that use OverrideAudit should or need to be told when files are different. Basically, the usage case that he mentions down here, if you're using it to tweak single things for personal use, but having a lot of overrides in packages like this that you expect to be around for a long period of time is more of a power user move. And I think the package should cater more towards regular users, finger quotes, than power users, because power users would be able to set a setting to make a thing work in a certain way or something along those lines, whereas a regular user wouldn't, and then they'd lose out on valuable information. So what if we had a version of the override report that would have to do diffs of things to see if files are overrides, if they're actually different at all. Um, and if it was an argument to the command, then there could be a little bit of extra stuff that happens. How did we figure on this for this part here? Oh, I have multiple fresheny type things on here, don't I? Oh, goodness gracious. That's the purple branch. Multiple freshen. Oh, right. Yeah. That's all related to just freshening and not override per se. Part of the thing there was trying to determine how exactly that should work. I'm thinking, come on. Oh, override report thread. Bow. This is where all of the overrides generally come from. And if I also did override report command, like so, that's in the commands thing. All it does is kick off a thread that passes in the arguments whether it should force reuse of the tab, whether it should only do expired things, and ignore empty is the one that tells it to not bother generating the report if it turns out that there would have been nothing displayed in it. That's normally set to false as we see here, but the automated check that happens when packages are installed and then removed from the unignored list, or when Sublime restarts and it's a new version from what was there, and we check to see if shipped packages have any overrides, those force ignore empty to true so that you don't constantly get an error, a thing popping up saying, hey, everything's fine, because that's sort of the default state. You assume things are going to be fine. So everything is going through here. I guess, whoops. Package report. It's in the core. This bit here. Report generation thread. Come on, man. There's a lot of stuff in here. But I would imagine if we just did the thread and it had an argument that told it to ignore same, ignore unchanged. That's the first thing we would have to do, so that the actual report can be controlled to include it or not. And then we include extra logic to get it to run diffs to see if there's any changes to know if it needs to include that thing. That's one thing we need. And then after that, we either have another command or we have a setting. I don't know which one of those is better. If there was a setting, then you would set it and then the command would only work the one way. You wouldn't be able to get it to work the other way. So maybe there needs to be a command. Clearly if the command had the same argument and it passed it to the report generation thing, then you could create your own entry in the command palette or as a key binding or something. That seems like a power user move. Anyway, all roads lead to the override report thread. as what we're wanting to actually do something with. Now, if we look at this, we could trace through this bad boy. There's that one class that we just looked at. That's the base class for all reports. It does all of the work of spitting off the thread, gathering any information that might be needed, and then it calls underscore process to actually do the stuff. And then in the end, it calls results. So this class has a specific instance variable in it that gives it the actual result, which is, result. I think we need to call set content to set the title of the report, what the actual content is, the type which is used in a setting. Then we need the syntax, any additional settings that might get set. When we were looking at that code, there was that was what the for loop right above the line that we added to jump the cursor to the start of the line was doing, taking settings and applying them in sort of a generic fashion. And all this is doing is getting the list of packages, gather some settings, get information from the arguments the thread was given so that we know what the title and the report type should be. These are settings that are applied to the buffer so that the command knows what sorts of arguments should appear in here, whether commands should be enabled and stuff like that. The list of things that should be ignored, and then we lump through all of the packages. If they're not ignored, we do output package on them, which might actually return something or it might not. And the bulk of everything that happens is sort of in here and sort of in that class that we were just fixing as the first thing that we did here. The package info class gathers information about a particular package, whether there's a shipped package, an installed package, a packages folder, and for all of those things, what the content of all of them is. And it stores them as package file sets, which is a custom set that I implemented that's case sensitive. And then it's easy enough to figure out what's an override and what's not by just checking the sets. So overrides are the set of files that is the intersection of files that exist inside of the package file and exist in the unpacked packages folder. Anything that's in there must be an override because that's what an override actually means. And that's why it has to be case sensitive, except on Windows and Mac OS where it doesn't really have to be case sensitive. But as a secret tip, whenever I talk to anybody about creating overrides, I always tell them to make the case exactly the same, even though it technically only matters under Linux, because it's really things go real confusing real quick. It's possible under Windows to create a default package folder named default all uppercase, and the contents of it will still override things inside of the default package. There's actually code in OverrideAudit that actually works around that sort of thing, so it still seems to work. It was a pain in the butt. No need to do anything if there's no overrides. And output overrides is even more where more of this work is happening, which is that bit. So I think if we had a new argument to this that was ignore unchanged, which defaulted to false, but which we could set to true, and that was passed into here, then it could be passed as an argument to output package. And output package would do everything that it normally does here. But if that setting was set, then it could iterate over the list of normal and expired overrides, or just overrides in general, I guess, and redact them out. I guess just normal overrides. You wouldn't want to do it for expired overrides, or would you? That's something that could be tweaked later. Then when the actual set of files is actually overrides you want to display, then it can call output overrides. So we would need to do that sort of fiddling right here, I think. So let's see what we got. let's say we don't care about that per se. We don't care about that per se, but we do want that OA override report command. He specifically mentioned override reports, right? Or bulk diff. Oh, that's unfortunate because that's multiple things that we have to do. Let's say this would be one of those situations where we're going to work it first and then see what we can reuse. Unchanged equals false, like this. Bump that down, and then we want exclude unchanged equals exclude unchanged. We can provide any arguments we want to this particular thing, I'm fairly certain, because we're not even implementing anything in here. Why does that keep happening? I am more than a little confused about how often that seems to be happening. Oh, because it's not in that file. All right. That makes sense. What do we actually call that? I already forget. Wait, is the thread and the command in the same file? Oh, that was clever of me, wasn't it? Jesus Christ. There we go for, clean code, and I'm still terrible at working with it. Do that, and then do bump bump. That one. There. As far as we know, that all works. Cool. Now, that is going to be need to shot down into output package as well. So we'll add it here before ignore patterns. So we find output package, and before ignore patterns, we shoot that in. Now it's starting to get a little long, so we'll do a little bit of that. Still compile. Cool. So everything as of right now should still work. And it does. What we might actually want to do is, for the purposes of actually testing this, bulk diff all packages, is there anything in here that actually isn't? The C++ single file is the only one of these that is currently empty. At least there's one. I'm pretty sure that one doesn't actually need to be there. I'm surprised that one is. Why did I override that? Weird. I have to look back through the history of the Discord to see what I thought was going on in that point. All right, so what did I say? C++, single file, Sublime build. It's the only thing that would be excluded from this. Shipped override, normal overrides, simple overrides, expired overrides. Okay, and unpacked contents unknown filtered. Right. If there are unknown overrides, then let's do a little test here. After all of this, we could say if package info.name is equal to C++ and do this. Just to make sure that I got that right. And we're talking about override reports, right? So we'll go ahead and do that. And okay, so cool. Next, we print shipped override and whoops, normal overrides. Whoops, expired overrides and expired package, which I'm pretty sure that's going to be false here. That only happens in very specific cases. So reload that and then reload this. If you look, there's exactly C++ package shipped override. No, it does not have a complex override because this isn't this package is only shipped and unpacked. This would be true if there was a copy of this package in the installed packages folder, in which case that one would take precedence over the one that Sublime ships with. The so-called whole package override, that is possible, and in all the time that I've used Sublime, I've never seen anybody actually do it. But nevertheless, I added support to it for to OverrideAudit. The list of normal overrides is just the one file. There aren't any expired ones. And it's not an expired package, which can only happen if you were to have a replacement Sublime package file in the installed packages folder with the same name as the file in the packages folder in the installation directory of Sublime, causing it to be a complete override, and the package in the shipped packages folder was newer, meaning that Sublime updated and the C++ package is newer than whatever version you copied, in which case we need to know that information to change up the header that we stick on the end of the line to say complete override expired. I'm gonna say that in order to test this, we should go to the packages folder and go to the C++ package and touch unknown.txt like so. So that we can see that there should be, well, we didn't provide the list of unknown overrides. So if there's not any normal and there's not any shipped and there's not any unknown, then leave. Oh, I actually excluded it from here by accident. I see. I see what I did there. Whoops. There we go. So there is one now, but otherwise there wouldn't have been one. We need to do this after that point because we can figure out what's unknown by knowing what files exist in the package, and then anything that's not in the package is an unknown override. So between the point where we figure out what all of the overrides are and the part where we decide to bail out and say we're not doing anything if there aren't any overrides is the part where we filter overrides. So this is the part where we would say if exclude unchanged, then we would say normal overrides is equal to filter unchanged, unmodified overrides. What would we pass it? We'd package info because it needs to know what package it's doing anything with at any given point. We would need to pass it the list of normal overrides, and I think that's probably all it would need. And then the idea is this would return back a new set that has files removed from it. It would get to here, and if there were any regular overrides, any normal overrides that are not modified, they would be removed out of the list. So only modified ones would show, and if there was only modified ones, they'd go away completely, which is what you want. But if they're expired, then leave them in there because it's something that you should probably know about. But that goes to the thing that Fichtfall asked for, which was being able to bulk freshen things. I think that's the way to go for that. Yeah, okay. I'm going to leave that in here for the time being, and we're going to copy this line because I think this is something that should be in the core, so we should probably actually do that instead. The core is the place where I put a lot of the common stuff here. So let's see. Find override diff with submerge, diff externally, diff override. This is actually firing off an actual diff to diff a thing, which isn't what we want to do here, but we're already running in a thread, so we don't need to worry about that here. Okay, and then we'll return normal override. So here we might say printf, print filtering out unchanged. Oh, actually, I should be using log for that. Filtering unchanged overrides from this. And that's all we really need to do there. And then return, well, this can just be like so. 2, 2, and technically we don't really need to pass this as an argument because it was sort of gathered from this package info, but if we wanted to, we could just pass package info and change the name of this to filter unmodified simple overrides, for example, and then not have to pass this list at all. But it seems like there might be more utility in taking a list of what you consider to be an override and having it modified instead. Then it's possible for you to pre-filter some things out of this if you wanted to, and things would still tend to work. That was weird. Okay, so we're going to leave that as that. Given a list of overrides from a particular package, filter, return a copy of the list that's filtered so that any overrides that have not been changed from the underlying file are removed. I think if I hit this, we should see it saying something. Maybe if I actually... Oh, no, it wouldn't be called for a refresh, would it? Oh, that's an added wrinkle. We'll worry about that in a second. Hang on. Let's come back over here and say this needs to be accounted for on refresh too, so that we don't forget. Because I'm pretty sure the list of arguments isn't stored here. Override reports are expected to work the same way. So what we would probably have to do is persist this as an extra setting and make the refresh of the report do the same thing. But we're not going to worry about that for this one right here. But we're just going to go ahead and create a new override report. Did we see it say anything there? No, because we didn't modify the command yet. Aye. Right, and it's at the bottom of this file. Stop making that mistake, thank you. Set this temporarily to true. And reload the package. Oh, what say if we're gonna call this, maybe we should also include it, and then when we try to call it, it won't throw an error. So that's cool. It's listed through all of the things. Right. Oh, I was seeing the print anyway. And exclude unchanged. That is what we want to see there. And then we come back over here. We know it's definitely doing something, so we can remove the log for the time being. Yeah. We just want to be able to see it actually doing a thing. So for the one package we care about, it's actually doing something. Cool. Now all we got to do is remember how diffing works, which we would probably get to by fiddling with this thing. A little bit of this action, and go back to where we were. However you do that. Was I in here? I was. For override in overrides. Result is equal to, whoops, this. And yeah, we don't really care about that per se. That's actually something that's in this thing. It's basically it's calling this and creating a result. Now, how do we know if the diff result is actually empty? Is empty. All right, well, that seems like it's probably pretty easy. If result dot is empty, is unchanged. And yeah, again, we probably could have used the log for that, but we'll go ahead and say override. Still not actually changing anything about it, but that's okay. And reload that. Now we need to create a new report. Oh, whoops. I don't care. I don't care about the number of context lines because we're not actually displaying the thing, you know? Override is unchanged. C++ single file .sublime build. Right on, right on. So overrides minus equals override. This is one of those things where we need to modify a set, and I'm not entirely sure how that works. Well, I mean, I was at some point. That doesn't seem to do it. It said it was unchanged, but it's still in that list when it's returned. Okay. Result is overrides. Just to double check. We got a lot of these things going on. So does this mean the result still contains that file? All right, so let's try this. Python remove item from set. Is it not the minus? We have to use remove? Really? That doesn't seem right somehow. Okay, it's a built-in type. I'm doing that thing where I'm looking at a monitor over here. In, not in. Union is pipe. Intersection is at. Difference, set minus other. Return a new set with elements in the set that are not in the other sets. All right, so I guess that makes sense. It's not actually a set unless I wrap it in like a set constructor. Copy, remove an element from the set. All right, I'm not proud. Dot remove override. Zoop and override report. Still no, huh? That's interesting. Oh, did I do the thing where I forgot to push the button? I might have. Nope, that didn't fix it either. What am I missing now? First of all, that should very much... Well, okay, so that's definitely working. So the problem is at the call point. That's good. That's going to be this file here. It wasn't in that list, but it still ended up in here. Okay, well, that's good then, such as it is. We don't want this. We don't want this. That part is totally good now. Now, when we do it, we should just get that list. But for some reason, it still shows up in there. Even though that is happening. Would it do that if this wasn't here? I mean, I'm pretty sure it would. So now the question becomes, why is it doing that? Because it really doesn't seem like it should be. Oh, what's this? Somebody asking a question. Select all, split into lines, home, enter some text, bloop, make Sublime Text. Oh, yeah. This just in, if you have 80,000 concurrent selections, Sublime doesn't react well to insertions. Color me surprised that 80,000 instantaneous insertions is a little taxing. Okay. Did I spell it differently or something? No. Output overrides gets it as an overrides argument. Oh, if there are unknown overrides, we don't say that there are no simple overrides found. Right. There have to be some, but if none are expired, use a different message. For item in the expired, if we're only doing expired else package files. We only want to append it if it's actually something. The problem with this, such as it is that it assumes that all the list of normal overrides is a list of every override that exists in the package. It might also exist in the list of expired overrides or in the list of unknown overrides. Okay, so this is the basic one because it's actually iterating over all of the files, which is that one there. But I don't know that we necessarily want to the unpacked contents with unknown filtered, right? Because we need to do special handling for those. So it's not pretty, but if one was to type it correctly, it works. So that's nice. This seems like it would be good to have as a setting or an option on the command. Now, if I was to refresh this, it's coming back to the same thing, but only because I think the refresh is using the same command. That's something to look into. For a diff, I could totally see an item that says diff ignore unchanged sort of thing. And in that case, you wouldn't even care if they were expired or not. You just care about them not being there, right? So I think that's actually kind of what you like. I don't know that we necessarily even need this extra bit on here. Let's take a look at that code since we're going to clean this up a little bit. If I did override, binary result is none, right? Okay, so if override is binary, then you get an override diff result with is binary is true. That begs the question of binary files aren't diffed. So this might still show binary files. That's an interesting wrinkle as well. Oh, really? That's all there is there? I guess the rest of it was in here. Yeah, we did that. What should we do for a binary file? Let's go ahead and remove this because we don't care about that anymore, neither. That might be a nice skip. We don't diff binary files and we always show them. How they would always show up in the report. For the purposes of what what Michael is asking for, I don't think that necessarily matters per se. Does it? I wouldn't think so. Default packages don't tend to have things in them, and they can't be diffed right now anyhow. I guess we could sort of modify this bit. We don't diff binary files, so keep binary indicates whether files that are oh, actually, no, maybe we won't do that because we're specifically doing this to keep track of files that are unchanged, and we don't know if binary files are unchanged at the moment because we don't diff them, although we do have a branch that's dedicated to that, so we're not going to worry about that here. But we can use this here in this to do the thing we want easily enough by passing in an item, passing it there, and in here, we're not diffing those yet. Again, but we probably will be. This needs to be accounted for on refresh too, and I think that's something we need to worry about right here. But if you're told to exclude unchanged overrides, then modify the list directly, and then this bit down here just does this. And we might even make this even cleverer to say if item not in overrides, continue. and then not do it down here at all. Why do any of this stuff? If we're filtering unchanged, this item might not be in the list. Okay, to remind ourselves of that, and that's really all we need to do for this. So the next thing we're going to do is go back to here and set this to be false. So if we were to generate an override report, we would end up with, well, if we were to reload the plugin and then we were to generate an override report, that file would come back. Okay, that's why we don't do it that way. Good, okay. I knew there was a reason. I kind of thought of that at the time. Oh, sorry, that's in core. We need to take this back to the, oops. Oh, sorry, that was over here. That thing I just changed, this does need to be down here. And not here. Because unknown items are also not in the list. If we're filtering on change, this item might not be in the list, but neither are unknown things, so we need to do this last, is the way to pull that off. Format that. Cool. Now, again, if we do that, we see both of those files there exactly the way we want. Then we go to the commands file and find the override report and say exclude unchanged and pass in some arguments. And the arguments we want to pass are this one, like so. So now, if we were to say we wanted an override report, we end up with that result. And if we said we wanted an override report exclude unchanged, we end up with that, the way we might expect. And if I reload this one, that thing comes back because reloading doesn't respect that. And we're getting close to the end of this, but we might have a version of this to test out. So the next thing is, if I looked at the key map, OverrideAudit refresh report. Oops. Boop, boo. Package report, OverrideAudit, override report. Boop, 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 boo. Okay. And then we just run the command. Offer to refresh existing reports after manual changes have been made. This can only be invoked when the current view is a report. So if we went up to this bit and said override audit exclude unknown like this, and gave it a value of exclude unchanged, pardon me, then when we execute this, the value of that particular argument as it was provided, there, and there, would be applied in this setting. And then we reload that, and that seems to work. And then we come over to here. The target view is going to be the actual report itself. We focus the target view and run the command. This command should only be available for something like that. So we might say If view.settings.get this and false, then args. I've already forgotten what the thing is called. Exclude unchanged. Yeah, there you go. Refresh that. Okay, so if I was to create a report and say regular override audit report, then it pops in and that unknown file is still there. And if I was to refresh this, what did I do? Is that not what it's called? Oh, it's called target view. Whoops. Why did I think it was? Huh. Whoops. Well, that's my bad. Okay. If I refresh this one, that's what happens. And similarly, if I use this, or if I right-clicked on this tab and said refresh override report, it would focus it and do that. Okay. Then I close that list and I say override report exclude unchanged, like so, and it doesn't appear there. And I push the key, and when it refreshes, it does not appear there. And if I did from them here, it doesn't appear. And if I did this and said refresh, it doesn't come back. But if I did a regular override report, it would come back. And then when I hit the key to refresh, it comes back because it's always forced in. So that is good. That's what we want. We find this thing. We go up here to that. Leave that one in, and that's more or less that part done. Oh, also, do, do, do. Probably need a little bit of that action too, so that if you were the sort of person that uses this from the menu, you might say override report exclude unchanged, and it would go like so. I guess one last thing we might want to put in here is something like, let's see, generation time, report generated, boop. That part happens above, that part happens below. If exclude unchanged, showing only modified overrides. This is bad text, but we're just testing to see how she'll look. So if we go for override report, we're not going to see it in there. But if we were to go for exclude unchanged, we'd see showing only modified overrides. Oh. Right on. I think that is what we want for that, but we maybe make the text. Overrides with unchanged content may exist. Does that sound better? I think, yeah, this doesn't even necessarily need to be a setting, does it? No. So it works on creating a report. It's got a new command. We can refresh it. This seems to be a nice way to go, I think, at least for an initial thing. And then we can do a little bit more discussion because that's not something I really discussed previously. Okay. What am I missing here? Anything? If we go through, we have that, we have that, we have that. Okay, I think. And we need to basically do the exact same changes in the diff thing as well. So we're going to leave core there. I'm going to pull this file out and drop it over here because we don't need to see it per se. For diffing, we're in a little bit more of a sticky widget here. And we might not even work on this tonight. Well, as a matter of fact, we might actually not because it's actually 10 o'clock and we're pretty much almost at stream time here. But let's just go ahead and investigate a little. I'm going to close that file. We don't care about. This will, I think this should also refresh a diff report as well based on that. This is where it knows that's a package report. Both of those are specific override reports. Otherwise, there's a setting that's applied to the buffer that is specifies what the report type is, and one of those, if it's just a regular package name, then it would be a bulk diff on a single package. Otherwise, it's got like a colon all, that's a bulk diff on all packages, which is why the default value here is diff report as the command to execute if you don't do any of that thing. And the nice thing is if our diff uses the same setting as we use here, then it would pass the same argument along. Diff report command, diff single command, diff package command. Now I think if we look here, this gets a packet bulk diff of all overrides in either all packages or a single package, depending on the argument provided, which can be a single item, a single package, or none to be like all. And bulk diff report thread is clearly up here based on what we learned. So if package is not none, then we assume it to be a name and we pull it out of the list. Otherwise, we just do every package that has an override and go from there. And there are other commands. The diff single command would be diffing for a single override, which is not something that would apply here. So that's nice. Diff package and would also do the same thing. I think it calls diff report command behind the scenes. Yeah, OverrideAudit diff report, but it gives it a specific package whereby otherwise it wouldn't have one. So that might be a little bit of a stickler. If you wanted to diff a single package, you'd need to provide that argument and it would need to pass it through, which currently it doesn't. But if we ignored that for the time being and just assumed this, it probably has very similar type action. It's going to find all packages with overrides or a specific one and call diff packages where it actually does the diffing. Now, I think the way this one currently works, it assumes it's got to put something into every buffer. That's what the perform diff does. Perform diff doesn't return a Boolean to know that if it actually appended anything or not. So this would have to have the same sort of logic as the other one did, where it checks to see if it needs to do anything and it returns yes or no. But apart from that, it's gonna have to call this for every override. So it could decide not to. The problem with this per se is that what it would have to do, I'm going to bring this one back in because I don't think we're going to work on this one tonight. This one is a little bit more convoluted. This one here, the output package returns a Boolean that says if it actually output anything or not, specifically because the override command already had the ability to mask things that are empty and then decide not to display itself. And this one doesn't, so that would need to be there, which means that it has to diff an entire package ahead of time before it starts sending the output out, which might be complicated. Well, not complicated, but memory intensive. There might be a better way to pull something like that off, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button that most definitely performs a fade and not a stinger transition. Hey, it worked this time. Right on. Well, we're going to go ahead and call the stream there. I think we got a nice feature in here, at least the first part of one, which is a nice thing to have done. And we're probably either going to continue on with this next week or flip into HyperHelp. I'm not sure yet which one of those. It might depend on how much I manage to get done throughout the week. But I think we might want to focus on a new OverrideAudit release with this feature and the bulk freshen feature, because I really want to get on the creating patch files version of this whole thing. So thanks for watching. Sorry about that weird volume snafu at the beginning there. I mean, it was turned not all the way down, but it seemed to be, I guess, completely quiet. I was seeing some movement in the meters there, but perhaps not enough for something to be able to make any sense of anything. So thank goodness, and thank you for pointing that out in the chat, or this would have been a very boring stream replay such as this. So we will see you in the next stream next week. And after this stream is over, I'll be scheduling up the next 4 or 5 streams all in a stretch after I lock down what the actual topics for those things will be, because I'm trying to get into the habit of actually saying what it is we're probably going to be working on, with the proviso that whatever we might have working on, sometimes, like at the beginning of this one, we might come up with our own little extra project, something we want to test before we dive into the stream proper. But it's nice to have a plan for what might actually happen. So thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can always subscribe to this channel if you'd like to catch these streams when they're live. You can pop into the chat and let me know when my microphone isn't working quite right, or ask questions about Sublime package development, anything else. And I have another channel, which is also linked down in the description below, where I do weekly Sublime Text tutorial videos as well. So until the next stream on this channel, or the next video on the other channel, this is OdatNurd asking you to please have a sublime day.